how the new cards play.
Well, that, on a brief note, that's interesting to hear that even a player of your caliber is interested in learning more about cards early on and trying them out, that it doesn't come to you immediately.
No, being a good limited player, people often ask me things very quickly, and maybe I learn a little bit quicker as far as limited, but I don't start out knowing everything. I have to play some seals, play some drafts, and see how the cards perform to really get an idea of what's going to go on in the games.
Definitely worth pointing out.
And I had 2 rock farm skeletons. I only played 1.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, mostly for the reasons you just said, because I wasn't sure that it really fit the deck and would really be good at all.
In retrospect, would you have played both?
No, in retrospect, I might not have played either. I might have played the Kingpin's Pet over the rock farm skeleton.
On that note, we have a collection here of a few of the cards that were the last cuts for this deck. You want to review why these didn't make your deck? Now, in particular, I'm fascinated by the decision to not play Kingpin's Pet, which is one of the ostensibly top cards for this archetype, and a removal spell you've chosen not to play, even though, despite the power level of your deck, you pointed out that the weakness of it was you didn't have enough removal. So I could see even somebody watching the video up until this point would have believed that your advice leads to playing these cards. Tell us more.
Well, they're black. I mean, that's one of the main reasons. No, but I mean, I only have 4 black sources in my deck, right?
Gotcha.
I've got a Cluestone, or 5 black sources. I've got the Golgari Cluestone, the 2 Wars of Guildgates, and 2 basic swamps. So, and an Axeman Guardian. So, on around 5 to 6 black sources, I can't reliably cast my black cards when I want. And both of these cards, you'll notice, Kingpin's Pet and Devour Flesh don't cost very much mana, so it's much better if you can cast them right away. Devour Flesh isn't good at all in the late game. I mean, your opponent has some 2-drop or 3-drop that's not doing anything anymore to sacrifice, but it's a powerful card on turn 4 when they attack and you block and use a pump spell and you can blow them out like Devour Flesh.
That's an excellent point. Even though it's a removal spell, you're not only losing value on the mana cost, because if you can't cast it on the second turn, then you're not gaining any intrinsic value from it. In addition, you're pointing out that it doesn't just say destroy a creature. You look at it and you just say this is a removal spell, but specifically it's only good in the early game, in your estimation, or at least it gets
most of the time, clearly.
Now, I'm sure that many of our viewers can extrapolate immediately that if you only have the 5 sources of black, that does supply a bottleneck, a constriction on adding these cards, but I would imagine that a lot of people approaching this pool would have just changed the mana around in order to support these. Tell us more on why it was necessary to limit your black sources in this deck.
I worked on that. I would have liked to. I would have liked to play more of a straight 3 because I wanted to get Devour Flesh and Kingpin's Pet into the deck. But if you take a look at my deck, I've got a Sunspire Griffin. It's a double white 3-drop, requires quite a few play-ins. I've got the Scion of Vitu-Ghazi, which is an excellent 5-drop, also double white, requires a decent number of play-ins. I've got Collective Blessing, one of the best cards in Return to Ravnica, double green and a white. So I mean, I was pretty focused on needing all my mana. I was pretty focused on needing, double white to play Ready and Willing, double green to play Collective Blessing, double white to play Scion of Vitu-Ghazi, double white to play Sunspire Griffin, green to make white with Axebane Guardian. I mean, just green 1-drops like Centaur's Herald. I mean, you just can't get it all in there and still cast things when you need to. And with power like this, you're concerned about being able to cast things. You're not concerned about giving up all the power. Like, I played the Basilisk creature over the Kingpin's Pet when I consider the Kingpin's Pet a better card. And that makes even less sense with the fact that I'm light flashing black, and so if I'm not going to cast either in the early game, then why not choose a more powerful one? But the reason is because it's so important that I can play this on turn 2. The reason being, I have a ton of stuff to do on turn 3.
So that's actually where that decision came in when we were alluding to the number of 3-drops you had. A decision that wouldn't be classically logical. Just the slight free roll here of being able to cast this on turn 2, given this blood at 3, is actually what made the difference.
That's what made the difference, because I wasn't worried about the extra point of power so much for the flyer, because I don't need to kill them with a 2/2 flyer.
That's a good point. You also need to know the direction of your deck. You don't need to put forth a consistent clock with the highest power creatures available. You're just trying to get to Ready Willing, Collective Blessing, Queso, what have you.
Exactly. So I wanted the ability to put this out a turn earlier, as opposed to having my hand cluttered up when I might lose a tight game where my opponent presented pressure because I didn't cast one of my spells.
Would you be willing to say that a lot of players get themselves into a trap where, I'm sure you've been outside of a Grand Prix or a Pro Tour, and people are, they're disappointed and they're lost, they're complaining about mana trouble. Would you be willing to say that a lot of those players, those times that they couldn't cast Collective Blessing or they couldn't fuse Ready and Willing, that at least a high percentage of those times, it's actually their responsibility for not making the concessions that you've made in this circumstance of their mana. Those small differences, one less green, one less white, that's actually the long-term difference between their ability to cast spells and yours.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, you change the percentages pretty significantly when you change one or two sources, and you're talking about on turn 6, because you're seeing by then 13 of your 40 cards, a third of your deck.
Sure.
So, I mean, you're definitely changing the percentages, 5, 10% likeliness of being able to cast it, and that can be the difference between winning and losing.
Absolutely. So we haven't focused much on the Scion. It's starting to come up in conversation a lot. New card from Dragon's Maze. Some people even think it might have constructed application. Now, you've chosen Ready, Willing, and Collective Blessing as the best 2 cards in your deck, which makes a lot of sense to me. But when you're looking at Teysa, Eliminate Primordial, and Scion, is there any possibility that Scion is even better than the 7 drops due to its 5 mana cost?
Oh yeah, I think Scion is better than both the 7 drops. I don't even like the 2 7 drops in particular.
Really, that's fascinating, because the number 1 card after you played matches at the pre-release that people were complaining about was Teysa. But despite that, you're actually saying that although these make the deck, and they define to some extent what you're doing, that despite the much lower power level of Scion just in the text of the card, that you think that's better than
Well, I did beat several of the people I played with Teysa, but that is being somewhat results-oriented, because it doesn't have protection from spells and creatures.
Right.
And there are quite a few removal spells that can deal with a 4/4. And the fact that my opponents happen to not have them, I mean, it's just what happened. It's just variance. I mean, when I cast Teysa, most of the games I did, I was expecting them to kill it and beat me, because, I was falling behind because I had the 7 mana card in my hand. And, it's a pretty big opportunity cost when you're playing a game and you check this card, you can't cast it for a long time.
Sure.
And then when I finally put it down, I just expected they would kill it and beat me very easily. And they just never really had anything to kill it.
Understood.
Which can happen, you know what I mean? It's
Of course, it's one perk of playing that card. They don't always have it.
Right.
But at the same time, you're having the cost. When you're looking at the cost-benefit analysis, the cost of there's going to be times you can't cast it, there's going to be times it's not impactful, and there's times
you're going to have it. Right.
Exactly. Whereas this 5-drop is a lot different. It's producing immediate card advantage with the 1/1 flyer and the populate. So if they do have a removal spell, it's still gaining value. There's going to be a higher percentage of times that it's relevant in general, and on top of all that, it's only 5 minutes.
Right. The Scion is excellent because, I mean, you get to 5 almost every game, as opposed to 7 where a legitimate percentage of the time you don't hit. And if they have the removal, you still net it some things. I mean, I like the Scion a lot. And I don't want to give the wrong impression either. I mean, I'm hearing, it talked about and looking at all these great cards. I didn't think this deck was bad at all. I mean, I thought it was a 5 on a 10 scale. Just basically completely.
Well, that's good clarification. On 1 to 10 scale, I would have felt at the time you were saying it was 3.5, 4, or something like that.
I basically, I played 2 pre-releases here, and I thought my first deck was a 5. This one, my second deck was a 7. On the 10 scale.
We're going to be excited to cover that one as well after this. A couple more questions. Did you ever consider not playing Axebane Guardian because you didn't have other defenders to use with it?
I did. He was actually one of the last additions to the deck.
Oh, really?
He was, yeah, because I have another Cluestone in my sideboard that I didn't play, and I wasn't really sure which of them was better. I like the Axebane Guardian a lot when you have a few other defenders, even if it's only a couple more, like 2 more.
Sure.
Because if he ever starts adding 2 mana, that's a really big game. But when he's only adding 1 mana, he's only marginally better than a land. And, I mean, you're paying 3 mana, and you can't really block with him because there's a lot of pump spells in this format.
Sure.
So, I mean, he was one of the last additions. I mostly put him in because of the Black Splash. If I was playing a 2-color green-white deck with about the same mana cost and everything all the same, I would probably not have included the Axebane Guardian.
Understood. Do you think in a deck of this style, you're pretty much going to play most of the Cluestones, Guardians, what have you, that you can get your hands on?
So, you definitely are, because they're mana fixing, they're mana accelerating, those are both things you're looking for. 3 mana is a decent amount to pay for something that doesn't impact the board in any way, shape, or form.
Sure.
So you can only play so many. There's definitely diminishing returns on each additional Cluestone. Clearly, if you have 1 Cluestone and you're opening 10, 11 cards by turn 3, that's better than if you have 2. You don't want to ramp on turn 3 and not impact the board, and then ramp again on turn 4 and not impact the board.
Right, and in fact, in some of your tougher games, I saw that happening to you, where you're playing Cluestones, you're not affecting the board in kind of a chess sense. You're not affecting the center of the board, you're not progressing your game state directly. Once you're to the point where you're casting Cluestones and sacrificing Cluestones in turns between 4 and 6, you know that something is probably not going quite
right. You're falling further behind. It's nice to have the 1 ramp, to have the mana fixing, so that you can maybe play your 7s on 6 when you have 2 7s.
Right.
But as a whole, like in booster draft, where you're not going to have 7s and you're not going to have that many 5s and 6s, I'm not sure that you're going to play very many clue stones.
Interesting.
In seal deck, when you have a deck like this, where I have an X spell, I've got multiple good 6s, multiple good 7s, then you're going to go ahead and play your clue stones.
One card I'd be remiss not to discuss at all, we haven't mentioned the new Armadillo cloak, Unflinching Courage. Now this card